Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with your host, Sam Webster Harris. Today we have a bit of a different episode, which features myself being interviewed by our last guest, Jack Kai. If you heard that episode, you will remember that Jack was a 3-time world record holder for solving Rubik's Cubes blindfolded, and as well as being an obsessive genius, an all-round wonderful individual, he is very inquisitive and curious, so he had a lot of interesting questions to ask me. During our conversation, we dove into such things as nomadism, relationships, making content, and useful mental models and questions to ask yourself. I will warn you that this episode does jump around a little bit as I have ADHD, and when I don't script myself, I may sometimes reveal just how interested I am in literally everything. And we start with a bunch of questions that I've been asking myself lately. The list was a little exhaustive, so I have edited it down to be something actually digestible. And then we break into a bunch of different insights and lessons around them, as well as some of my top insights on being a creator these days and the mistakes that people commonly make. And besides running this podcast, my last business was a tech platform working with over 80,000 podcast hosts. I've also worked with a few YouTubers with over 1 million subscribers, and I spent a year inside the BBC optimizing the psychology and emotions of their content. So on that, do enjoy this episode, briefly diving into some of the things that fascinate me.
What kind of stuff have you been working on lately? Actually, what kind of questions have you been asking yourself lately?
A few. So one thing was the one question that you should ask other people, and that most people don't need like a fortune teller or anyone to tell them what they're going to do with life. You just need some friends that know you well, because if you can ask people that know you well what they think of you and what they think you're going to do, you're probably going to get an accurate representation of. You don't need to rely on your ego to tell you what you think. Like, your friends will probably tell you if you're doing things the right way or if you're going to be successful at stuff or who you are. And so if you want to know who you are, you can just ask your friends. And I've just been thinking about people that like bother to spend time talking to me who don't know me that well, and like just like, what do they actually think of me? And like actually asking them as opposed to just thinking what they might think of me, because most people don't massively surprise you in terms of like outweighed success or outweighed failure from like, once you've known someone for a few years, you've kind of got a pretty accurate idea of their trajectory. And like people will sort of change their mind once they've had a bit of like a reality check or something. But if you ask your friends, like they have probably a better accurate prediction of your trajectory than you do, and just other stuff. So basically ask your friends what they think of you. That's one thing I've been asking myself. Definitely been asking myself a lot around. So what I spoke about around the concept of being a billionaire or is kind of pointless, and how much money do you actually want? And what is something like I really enjoy. Like today, I was just going through the different options that I have for next year, because I'm going to be in the pool September to December, and then I'm just like chilling out for December. So basically, as far as productive work, I'm like, okay, next year. And so I've also been asking myself what the hell I want to do with my career. Do I want to completely stop my podcast and not have like a permanent side hustle for once in my life? Do I want to find a full-time job? Do I want to find a part-time job? What are all the skills that I have that are useful, and how can they be combined? Like, do I want to use my mountain guiding qualification plus all my business experience to do like business team leadership tours, or maybe like take influencers and do like some kind of like creative mind-blowing experience where like we go hiking through the mountains for 3 days, but also take shrooms and also like work out how to be like 10 times more creative than they've been before or something? Or do I want to get like a completely boring job and just be like a barrister or something and just like make enough money to cover my costs, because if I've already got like investments and things, and as long as I'm not really touching them, like I have enough money for life anyway. So yeah, all the different options and working out what would be most fun, perhaps. Yeah. So those are some questions I'm asking myself a lot. If I was to do more podcasting, definitely what are the kind of the questions for a podcast that would make it more interesting? So as in like, what makes a really bingeable podcast? As in that you can't stop listening to, and how can you ask the right question as the framework for a podcast to make sure that every episode is like discovering something really exciting that the listeners want to keep on coming back to? Because when I started the show, growth mindset was like a really big thing, but no one was doing it in a podcasting form. So like it was a really good avenue for a show because people wanted to find out more about growth mindset. But now there's like 1 million mindset podcasts. So it's not really like a very unique concept anymore. It's still like really nice to have really fun conversations with people. But as far as like, in the same way, like if everyone was solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded in 2 seconds, you probably wouldn't have been that bothered to like do it that hard. Like I'm just not that excited to run the podcast in the way that I used to be, even though I still get to have a really cool conversation with people like you sometimes, but I just don't go out of my way to like find strangers anymore. I think I'm a bit too introverted to be excited by oddness. There was this one guy, he was an accountant until he was 26 and he just started like running and he just broke. Well, he's currently now like the fastest guy in Britain and he's got like the fourth fastest 100-meter time ever. And like, so I reached out to him on LinkedIn because no one's reaching out to him on LinkedIn because he's an accountant. He obviously has LinkedIn, but everyone's used to like sports people being like on sports stuff. Get him on the show. So I'm like, he's cool, but otherwise I just spend most of my day just ignoring anyone that tries to get on my show. And that's clearly a sign that I'm probably not too bothered about it, even though like, there are people out there that are cool. So anyway, the point is I'm asking myself questions about like, what is a new formula for a show that's actually like good and unique. Quite a lot of questions there. How can I be like a really good partner to my girlfriend and have a good relationship whilst still spending time doing things for myself and trying to work out what the hell's going on in her brain the whole time because of, fascinating things. Where the hell do I want to live? How do I spend time with my friends? So, because now that I'm 30, I'm sort of noticing the problems that like my other friends are having and like loneliness that you have and how you can like really build community, because being a digital nomad's really nice in terms of the ability to explore and have new experiences in that sense, but it's really shit in terms of you don't have friends around that know you, like really know you. And that is something that you kind of do need in your life in the long term. And so working out where in the world actually would work well for me and for my girlfriend who has kind of different interests and needs is an interesting one, and not getting stuck in like the constant need for new things and trying to push my boundaries in terms of someone who's always liked risk and novelty and not knowing what's going on. My comfort zone is like outside my comfort zone, but then it is my comfort zone. And so like outside my comfort zone is like normality and staying in the same place. And so, yeah, working out what I should be pushing myself on and stuff. So anyway, lots of stuff, basically. Thanks for asking.
No worries. Yeah. Very detailed answer. So where in the world are you thinking of living at the moment based off what you've tried out? Or are there any other places that you think of trying to explore?
I am definitely biased towards places where I have friends now. Like I've got some good friends in Barcelona, Brussels, and the UK and Portugal. And having spent time in places that don't speak English that well, I am also biased towards places that speak English as the first language. So to the Netherlands is so easy to get by, like, because Dutch is hardly spoken anywhere in the world. There's a few TV stations in Dutch, but like from age of 0, they hear English all the time. So their English is perfect. Whereas like in Germany, Berlin, it's fine. But like actually, if you go into other parts of Germany, you probably need to learn German, for example. If you want to live in Italy, like you can't live in Italy without learning Italian. Actually, I don't mind learning a second language, but I'm trying to learn Portuguese because my girlfriend's Portuguese. So I don't want to like force myself to be trying to learn 2 languages at once. So it is a bit harder in that sense. And just seeing some of my friends that are super clever and actually quite good at learning languages, but they're still like actually having lived in other places, they'd rather live in like Ireland or somewhere where you can speak English for sure. I mean, I learned Spanish and like I always thought more I'd be in like Mexico or Spain, but my girlfriend's not so keen on that, which is fine. So those are some considerations. Then also like healthcare, having had some like healthcare problems and ended up in hospital a few times nearly dying, is like, it's really nice being somewhere where like you trust the healthcare is one thing. Places where rent and things is a bit more affordable is nice. So like actually Belgium is really cheap for housing and rent compared to wages, whereas like Amsterdam has a housing crisis. Basically everywhere has a housing crisis. Like Dublin's insane, London, Copenhagen. So Belgium's actually one of the better places in terms of housing. So there's some things that I think about. I mean, Amsterdam's super nice because of it has like all the cycle lanes and I really like cycling and it's just super easy to get about and in the size of the city. But everything here is super flat. So I'd rather be somewhere that has some hills and I can do stuff that isn't flat, because it's like, I don't know, my head is just getting, I don't know, it's just overwhelmed by flatness. Those are some things that I'm thinking about. I really loved Mexico and South America for the warmth, and people dance, which is a thing that just, it's weird to kind of try and explain, but like when you're used to only people dancing when they're absolutely wasted or in a club, you kind of don't think about the fact that like actually you can just go to like a local bar at like 6 o'clock and dance with your mate's mum and it's like completely normal. And it's just super nice culture that everyone can dance, and like everything is just like so much rhythm and soul. And that I really, really liked that you just don't really have in Europe in the same way. But I can't solve that problem. Also home and parents and things. It's nice to be able to actually see your family because they will die at some point. And after you've moved out from home, you don't actually see them that much. And they're kind of important because once they're gone, they're gone. And I'm old enough that all my grandparents have died, and I definitely regret not spending as much time as I could have done as they were older. And my nan's sister's still alive. She was like 10 years younger. So I do try and like spend some time with her because her grandsons don't actually call her that much. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? She'll die soon. Just give her a call, please. She's super funny. She reminds me of my nan, so it's nice to hang out.
It's interesting, yeah. Especially talking to people like yourself, bro, like, 5-10 years. A lot of people are like 5-10 years like ahead of me, so it's like kind of interesting. Feeling about all the experimentation and like seeing like where the sort of feeling they are in life. So no, it's interesting.
This is one of those things that it's hard to know until you've done it, like you were saying about like climbing that first mountain and then realizing like actually like the second mountain, that working out how to be happy and doing stuff is the important one. It's hard to understand that your grandparents will die until they're dead. And they're kind of these people that are around and they're lovely, but it sort of feels like a little bit of a chore maybe or something to like call them as much as you should and do things. And then suddenly disappear. You're like, shit, where are they gone? So yeah, if you do have grandparents, it's nice to talk to them. It was one thing that you definitely learn. I'm pleased to announce that the Growth Mindset podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. There have been times in my life like exams, business proposals, before mountain expeditions, family holidays, many different occasions when I just need a good night's sleep, and yet my brain has other ideas for me. Your thoughts start racing, and instead of helping you, they just make things worse. Well, a great way to make racing thoughts go away is to talk them through, and therapy gives you a place to do just that. It can help you break out of negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional space for yourself. I can honestly recommend BetterHelp's service that I found super easy to use. I was matched with a licensed therapist of my choosing within a day, and it allowed me to switch for free with no questions asked. Also, being online just made it super convenient to fit around my schedule. So if you want to break free from your thoughts, I would consider using BetterHelp. For 10% off your first month, visit betterhelp.com/growthmindset today. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/growth mindset.
I was going to like ask about maybe what are the most sort of pressing things in mind or something, or like what are you project at the moment? But I feel like those kind of stem from the questions, I suppose. But I guess in regards to that, like, are there any, I don't know, projects or like anything you're especially interested in as of today that you haven't mentioned yet?
I have been intrigued by what is working really well. So like I was saying about like talking about formats for a podcast and questions that are just so obviously bingeable from the start. And then I also just found it interesting looking on YouTube and just seeing what works really well and what doesn't work. I've basically been like making a bit of a database of like two different things that stand out. So one is creators that are like quite new and have really poor quality stuff, and yet are getting like a lot of views on something that is just like a concept that just people really want to watch, whilst comparing though whatever they've done to something that hasn't worked that is quite similar. And the other is looking at people who are doing quite well and have a good audience, but trying to find someone that's very similar to them that just is working much better for different reasons, or what people could be doing differently. So like, for example, my cousin is Geowizard. He has like 1.4 million subscribers. And then like Zach and Jay is like another channel. They have about the same amount of subscribers. They're both British. They're both kind of cheeky and like have like a nice sense of humor. But Zach and Jay, like they'll do like 8 to 15 minute episodes maximum, always like high clickbaity stuff. Whereas Geowizard will just basically do hour-long documentaries of him being himself, like walking through weird parts of the world in a straight line, or like trying to cross Birmingham without going on any roads, or like he did like a whole tour through America, but like a freaking whole hour long. Like no one does that on YouTube. And he has his like just his gaming videos of him playing GeoGuessr. But like Zach and Jay, he put so much effort into like the thumbnail, the storyline, the hook, and everything. And that some of his videos will get way less views than Geowizard's. And the amount of watch time that Geowizard has is like insane because of, he puts more videos out because of, he has like the GeoGuessr stuff. And then like his other ones are just super, super long. And he gets like way more consistent views, but he's built such a loyal audience by just being like really different and weird, even whereas like Zach and Jay is just a little bit too clickbaity. Depends on like the strength of the thumbnail and like the title every single time. Even though he's a really nice guy and he is really funny, like just as funny as my cousin, his audience just isn't as willing to watch every single thing that he puts out. And it's just really interesting watching people that are like super similar, but like some nuances mean that one has like a crazy loyal audience that watches like technically 10 times more content than him as the other, even though like the same subscriber following and stuff. So yeah, I've just been geeking out on like why things are working better for some people and how to build the community that will like keep on following you versus like becoming someone that's more of a commodity, because of like TikTok is like so much of it is commodification, and you'll see people that are like, will have something that blows up and they get like a bunch of followers, but then like they'll still only get like 1,000 views on the next thing. And like, it's really hard. But how do you actually become someone that like people just like always like, which is like a super hard question to solve. But
It seems like a lot of it, I think from what I observed, is based on like the idea. And then like, I think, for example,
yeah,
Geowizard, right? Yeah. I think like those videos where he crosses progresses content and stuff, it's like a lot of perceived sort of effort behind it. And he can sort of showcase that like, very briefly, just like, in the title, like I literally walk across like Norway or whatever. And that in itself, just the idea is already sort of like clickbaity in itself. And I think maybe it's the same with like, Mr. Beast. And obviously he does a lot of stuff like we had seen.
yes, his straight line missions are like super clickbaity, and it was just like an epic thing that he went and did the first time. And but on his like his America series, it was just like two guys bumming through America. It's just like a travel vlog, which like people don't watch anymore, but it still got like 700K views per episode, and they were like an hour long. There was too much in it. I mean, I'm his cousin, but I still didn't watch them that much, but like his community did, which I find even weirder. So like even stuff that isn't like crazy compelling still sort of works, if that makes sense.
I think like when you do have the community and people care about you, then yeah, you can do that as well. Yeah, I think that applies across like kind of all niches. Like once people give a damn about you, maybe for doing this big idea because you're an expert or something like that, then people are just gonna watch the random stuff even though it's quite difficult. Maybe it's you doing your own stuff because they want to learn more about you. Yeah.
Obviously his straight line missions were really cool and clickbaity because they were so long. You actually got to know him really well. And two, because he does the geoguessing, like you spend a lot of time with him. Like people would just put it on their background because they like his voice and he makes some like odd jokes as it's going along. So people spent like so much more time with him as a person in their ears or like on their screens than like Zach and Jay. It's just always like a really short, like them doing something crazy, and you don't necessarily watch every one. So like the next one doesn't actually matter that much. Whereas like him, you just put him on the background. He's just nice to be there kind of thing, which is one part. But in general, I do think when you look at TikTokers, like comedians, they get way more consistent views than someone that's like a travel vlogger who will like have some crazy hotel that looks super nuts and like will get like 1 million views, and then the next one are like the best restaurants in Amsterdam and like no one will watch it kind of thing. Whereas if you watch someone that's funny and you watch like a few more videos of them that are funny, you'll always like them. And then like every new video they create, you'll get shown and you'll watch it because you know that they're funny. And so like I think comedians, if they actually deliver on the punchline consistently, like are in a really good place on TikTok if they actually are funny, for example. And I think in general, I think that's a huge opportunity in terms of whatever you're doing. If you can actually tell like a really good story and be funny at the same time on YouTube consistently, like you're in a good place. Because I watched like some of the best videos on North Korea and like they're really boring because it's hard to get into North Korea. Like, but I went to North Korea, but I didn't make that much video at the time. But if I had, I'm like, I could have done a much better job of anything that's like been made so far. And just some of the stuff that like I have done is like, okay, if you can just do whatever's popular, copy it, but just add some extra humor into it, I think you're kind of onto a winner. And like I did a stand-up comedy for a bit, and I wouldn't say like I'm like a hilarious person to be around, but I'm intelligent enough that if you give me a scenario, it might take me 10 minutes, it might take me an hour, but I can work out how to make it funny. And if you just take any script or whatever you're writing for YouTube, it's not necessarily obvious, but you can work out how to make anything funny. It's just logic and intelligence to work out why something is absurd and stuff. That is the one thing I would say. It then also depends on how much time you want to spend making and editing videos and things. And like I've certainly found that like, again, it's kind of like a lonely thing that I'm not actually that bothered about compared to what I thought. Because I'm like, oh, I could do this would be fun. And then I started doing it. I'm like, oh, I've made some really good videos, but yeah, got better things to do with my life, apparently. So those are some thoughts there. But yeah, I don't know. You have probably spent more time making videos than I have on YouTube. So maybe you know more than me.
Initially, I was just making this random like videos on like YouTube, just me solving the cube quickly because I saw everyone else doing it, and it was like not much effort. So I was like, let me just do that. And people started following me. I'm like, oh, why did people follow me? Oh, that's very cool. And I think I started making this random tutorial videos, maybe just help people. And then I think I leaned in towards that a bit more and mix up that and just like solve videos. And then I think more tutorial based stuff, but that was when I was trying to make some coaching service, but that didn't really work out. And then I think I tried doing entertainment stuff. And then I'll just like, I can't really be bothered doing this. I really like this so much. And I kind of stopped like almost 2 years ago. But yeah, it's just like, just try it, see if you like it or not. And then just kind of stopped and tried out some Twitter stuff, which is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, I do find writing a really nice process for the brain in terms of like arranging your thoughts better and actually spending time working out what the swirl and chaos thinks and stuff and making it useful, whilst also being much easier to get in front of people kind of quickly. Whereas like editing a video takes like a whole week. It is nice to make something really pretty though with video, or like funny, but it's really slow with a long process. But I definitely need to settle into doing something that takes time. And certainly with podcasts, it's like the ones where people really obsess over making something, and the main like niche differentiator about them is that they've just spent like 10 times more than anyone else going into something. Is like they're so listenable too. Like to tell you about like the Dissect podcast where he spends like 8 episodes just introducing an artist's life story to the point where he'll then spend like the rest of the whole series breaking down like just one album by them, where like each single episode is just one song of from the artist, and he'll go into like every single chord progression in the song, every single type of instrument that they've used and how they got there, every lyric that gets used across the song and the backstory behind it, and like the 5 different interpretations and like the story behind how any collaborating artist got involved and stuff. And it's just like obsessive level of things, and yet it's just like really, really listenable to as someone that like basically likes music production and stuff, because you're like, oh my God, I did not know all of this knowledge that has just come at me, but I liked the song. and it's crazy to think like what was going on in like the selection process that was going through the artist's head and how they achieved all those things. So if you can just like obsess like a crazy amount, then generally you can get to like a niche, but that takes time being obsessed, which is why it's nice to work out what you can get obsessed about and then lean into them as opposed to not. So like kind of ADHD can be like a good thing in that sense. But then if you get bored really quickly after a while, then there's a problem. So that's the end of the interview. Thanks again for Jack Kai being such a legend, and do follow him on YouTube, TikTok, or Twitter, where he writes daily. Jack Kai, Rubik's Cube Master. On that, I should probably actually mention myself. I don't really bother to mention my channels, but samjam.zen is my Instagram if you feel like it, and I write a newsletter called Explosive Thinking for all things creativity and philosophy and mindset. And of course, this was the Growth Mindset podcast where we talk about the psychology of self-improvement. And if you do not follow us, do please follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or any other podcast app, and hit us up with a good rating and a comment, because I need to pretend to my girlfriend that I do something that people actually like. Otherwise, she might leave me. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen. And finally, as I like to always remind you, that life is to be enjoyed, and that does start with enjoying today, because enjoyment is not something to finally come around to in the future when you get time for it. Enjoyment is something as you live your life, which is literally right now. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.